did the same thing. Okay. Chapter 2 of Treasures of the Snow. Grandmother arrives. So Danielle Bernier, age 3 hours, became the special property of Annette Bernier, age 7 years. Of course, the kind village nurse stayed for some time to bathe and feed him. And when she left, her father paid a woman from the village to come and nurse him. But Danny belonged to Annette, and nobody ever spoke of him as anything but Annette's baby. For once, the first great shock of losing her mother was over. Annette gathered up all the love of her sad, lonely little heart and poured it out on her little brother. She held his bottle while he sucked and sat quietly by his cradle in case he should wake and want her. It was Annette who ran to him in the night, if he woke or whimpered, and who carried him out onto the balcony at midday so that the sun might shine on him. And with so much love and sunshine surrounding him, the baby grew strong until there was no other baby of his age in the valley who was as healthy and beautiful. He slept and woke and chuckled and fed and kicked and slept again. In fact, he never gave a moment's worry to anyone. "He was born under a lucky star," exclaimed a woman from the village, gazing at him thoughtfully. "He was born under a Christmas star," said Annette solemnly. "I think he will always be happy and good." And oh, how he grew! By the time the sun was beginning to melt the snow and the crocuses were pushing up in the pale fields, Annette was having to think about new clothes. As soon as the cows had gone up the mountain, Danny cut his first tooth. As Annette knew nothing about first teeth and expected no trouble, the baby himself forgot that it should have been a painful time. So instead of fretting and crying, he just giggled and sucked his fists. So Danny was moving around, and his cradle could hold him no longer. He wanted to explore everything from the stove to the balcony steps, and Annette spent an anxious few weeks keeping him out of danger. In the end, she decided to tie him by one pink foot to the leg of the kitchen table, and he explored in circles, and life became more peaceful. It was just about this time that Annette, slipping down to the living room after tucking Danny up in his cradle, found her father sitting by the stove, with his head in his hands, looking old and tired and gray. He had often looked old and tired since his wife died, but tonight he looked worse than usual. Annette, who tried hard to make up for her mother, climbed onto his knees and laid her soft cheek against his brown, bony one. "What is the matter, Papa?" she asked. "Are you very tired tonight? Shall I make you a cup of coffee?" He looked down at her curiously. Uh-oh. It just went off.
You recording?
I don't know what happened.
Are you recording that, Grandma?
Oh, it's recording. Something came on accidentally. Okay, sorry. He looked down at her curiously for a minute or two. She was so small and light, like a golden-haired fairy, but how sensible and womanly she was. Somehow, during the past year, he had made a habit of telling her his troubles and even listening to her serious advice. So now he pulled her head against his shoulder and told her all about it. "We shall have to sell some of the cows, little daughter," he explained sadly. "We must have some more money or there will be no winter boots for you." Annette lifted her head and stared at him in horror. They only had 10 cows, and each one was a personal friend. Any one of them would be missed terribly. She must think of a better way to earn money than that. "You see," her father went on, "other men have wives to look after their little ones. I have to pay a woman to nurse Danny, and it is expensive. Yet someone must look after him, poor little lad." Annette sat up very straight and tossed back her plaits. She knew exactly what to do, and all she had to do was make her father agree. "Papa," she said very slowly and distinctly, "you do not need Mademoiselle Motier any longer. I am 8.5 now, and I can look after Danny as well as anyone. You will not have to pay me anything, and then we can keep the cows." "Why, think, Papa, how unhappy they would be to leave us. I do believe Paquerette would cry." "But you must go to school," said her father rather doubtfully. "It would not be right to keep you at home, and anyhow it is against the law. The schoolmaster would want to know why, and he would tell the mayor, and we should get into trouble. But it is much more important to look after Danny, answered Annette, wrinkling her forehead. And if you explain to the master, he would understand. He's a kind man, and he is a friend of yours. Let's try it and see what happens. I will do my lessons here in the kitchen, Papa, every morning, and Danny can play on the floor. In any case, it's only for 4 years. When Danny is 5, he will go to the infant school, and I can take him down and go to the big school. Her father continued to look at her thoughtfully. Although she was small, she was as clever as a woman in looking after the baby, and she was very handy about the house. But she could not do the cooking, or knit the stockings, or do the rough, heavy work. And besides, she ought to have some schooling. He sat thinking in silence for a full 5 minutes. Then he had an idea. I wonder if your grandmother would come, he said suddenly. She is old and has rheumatics, and her sight is poor, but she could do the cooking and mending perhaps, and she could help you with your lessons in the evenings. It would be company for you, too, when I am up the mountain. You're a little girl to be left alone all day. If I write a letter to the schoolmaster, telling him that grandmother will give you a bit of teaching, maybe he will agree to keep quiet about it. Annette climbed off his knee and fetched 2 sheets of paper and a pen and ink from the cupboard. Write to them both now, she said, and I will post them when I go for the bread. Then we shall get the answers nice and quickly. Both letters were answered that week. The first answer was grandmother herself, who arrived by train, bent and arthritic, with a wooden box roped up very securely. Annette went down to meet her and watched the little electric train twisting its way up the valley between the hayfields like a caterpillar. It was rather late, the driver explained angrily, because a cow had stayed onto the line and the train had had to stop. He moved off so quickly that grandmother hardly had time to get down, and her wooden box had to be thrown out after her while the train was moving away. Grandmother, however, did not seem at all worried. She leaned on her stick and wanted to know how she was going to get up the hill. Annette, who knew nothing about rheumatism, suggested that they should walk. But grandmother said, "Nonsense, child!" And in the end, they got a lift in an empty farm cart that had brought cheeses down to the train and was now going back up the mountain. The road was stony, the wheels wooden, and the mule uncertain, and Annette enjoyed the ride very much more than grandmother did. But the old woman gritted her teeth and made no complaint. She only let out a tired sigh of relief when she found herself safely on the sofa by the stove, with a cushion at her aching back and Annette bustling about getting her some tea. Danny came out from under the table, getting along on his bottom. He stuck 3 fingers in his mouth and laughed at grandmother, who put on her glasses to see him better. They sat for some moments staring at each other, her dim old eyes meeting his bright blue ones, and then Danny threw back his head and laughed again. "That child will wear out his trousers," said grandmother, taking a piece of bread and butter and jam. "He should be taught to crawl." She said no more until she had finished her tea, and then she flicked the crumbs from her black skirt and got up, leaning heavily on her stick. "So," she remarked, "I have come. What I can I will do, and what I cannot you must do for me. Now, Annette, turn that baby the right way up and come and show me around the kitchen." And from that moment, grandmother did what she could. Annette did the rest, and the household ran like clockwork, all except for Danny, who continued to move around and around the table legs on his bottom in spite of grandmother. So after a few days, Annette was sent to the village to buy a yard of thick black felt, and grandmother sewed round patches onto the seats of all Danny's trousers. He did look rather odd in them, but they served their purpose very well indeed, and after all, they were hardly ever seen, because they were nearly always underneath him. The second answer arrived in the shape of the old village schoolmaster, who walked wearily up from the valley late on Saturday afternoon to call on Monsieur Bernier. He was milking cows and saw him coming out the cowshed window. He did not want to argue with the schoolmaster because he was afraid of getting the worst of it, so he ran out the back door and hid in the hayloft. Annette, who was also looking out the living room window, saw her father's legs disappear up the ladder just as the schoolmaster came around the corner, and she understood perfectly what was expected of her. She opened the door and invited the master in, offering him most politely the best chair with a smart red seat. He was very fond of Annette, and Annette was very fond of him. But today they were a little bit shy of each other. Grandmother folded her hands and sat up straight like an old war horse, ready for battle. "I have come to see your father," began the schoolmaster, coughing nervously, "to discuss his letter about you being away from school. I cannot say that I think it right for a little girl of your age. Besides, it is against the law of the state." "The state will know nothing about it unless you choose to mention her," said Grandmother. "Besides, I will teach the child myself. I do not think it right for a little boy of Danny's age to be left without his sister to look after him." "But can't you look after him?" suggested the schoolmaster gently. "Certainly not," Grandmother said. "My sight is so poor I cannot see where he is going, and my arms are so rheumaticky that I cannot pick him up if he falls. Besides, he moves like an express train, and I am nearly 80. You do not know what you are talking about." The schoolmaster gazed at Danny, who was face downwards in the woodpile eating shavings. There was nothing much to be seen of him but the black felt patches in his dimpled brown legs. The master realized Grandmother would not be able to manage him. The schoolmaster didn't know what to do. Perhaps his old friend Monsieur Bernier would be more reasonable. He turned to Annette. "When will your father be in, Annette?" he asked. "I don't know. He has gone out and he may not be back for some time. Is it not worth your while to wait, monsieur?" replied Annette steadily, knowing perfectly well that her father would return just as soon as the master disappeared down the valley. The schoolmaster sat thinking. He was a good man and really cared about Annette and his duty toward her, yet he did not want to give up his old friend into the hands of the law, especially when it was quite clear that the child was needed at home. At last he had an idea. He did not think that it was a very good one, but it was better than nothing. "I will let the matter rest," he said at last, "on one condition only, and that is that every Saturday morning when Annette comes down for the bread, she shall visit me in my house, and I will test her. If I find she is making progress, I will say no more. But if I find she is learning nothing, then I shall feel it my duty to insist that she attends school like other children." He tried to speak sternly, but Annette beamed at him, and Danny, sensing a family victory, suddenly turned himself the right way up and crowed like a cock. The schoolmaster looked at the two fair, motherless children for a moment, smiled very tenderly, and said goodbye. As soon as he had disappeared into the pine wood, Annette ran to the door and called to her father to come down from the hayloft, and she told him the good news. So it was that every Saturday morning Annette rapped at the front door of the tall, white house where the schoolmaster lived, with her bread basket on her back and her tattered exercise book in her hand, and the schoolmaster joyfully let her in. In the winter they sat by the stove, ate spiced fruit tart, and drank hot chocolate, and in the summer they sat on the veranda and ate cherries and drank apple juice. After that, the tests would begin. They always started with arithmetic, but Annette was not good at arithmetic, as she never knew the answers. The schoolmaster would feel after a few minutes that it was a waste of time to ask her any more questions, so they would pass on to history, and here Annette never needed any answers. She would lean forward, clasping her knees, and relate how William Tell had won the freedom of Switzerland, and how the brave little sun had stood still while the apple was on his head, and it was split by the whizzing arrow. Annette knew all about brave Swiss heroes, and she and the schoolmaster would look at each other with shining eyes, for they both loved courage. After this, they would turn to the Bible, which Annette was beginning to know quite well, for she read it aloud to Grandmother every evening. By this time, the schoolmaster would have forgotten to tell Annette off, because she couldn't do her sums, and instead he would give her fresh books to read, and would fill the gaps in her bread basket with spiced gingerbread hearts and knobbly chocolate sticks wrapped in silver paper. Then they would say goodbye to one another, and he would stand at the door and watch her until she reached the edge of the pine wood, because here she always turned around to wave. Years ago, the schoolmaster had loved a golden-haired girl who lived high up in the mountain, and he had bought this white house, and made it beautiful for her. But she went out to pick solandellas and was killed by a treacherous fall of late snow. So the schoolmaster really lived alone. But in his dreams she was always there, and also a little daughter with corn-colored plates and eyes like blue gentians, who sat on a stool close to his knees. And on Saturday mornings that part of the schoolmaster's dream came true.
Wait, did the girl die?
No, the schoolmaster's girlfriend. He was going to marry this girl, but she was out picking flowers and was killed by some snow. Would one of you go in there and get my green water bottle? I need a drink before I continue.
Where?
It's in the kitchen on the table somewhere. It looks like we're missing some of the... We should put that away so we don't lose any. But anyway, do you want to grab it quick, my water bottle, please? It's a green one. I think I still have water in it. I hope there's enough water in it.
If you tap it, it makes a note. It makes it's like, or like if you tap it,
Okay.